Hello guys and welcome to the Everyday Unboxer. In today's video I am going to compare the PS5 against the Xbox Series S so you don't have to do it yourself. There are a few main differences between the PS5 digital version and the Xbox Series S. Mainly, the Xbox Series S does not have a native 4K, which the PS5 digital version does have. So, depending on what you like to play, depending on your monitor, and depending on your budget, there's a few key differences between the two that you should consider before getting one or the other. Even if you do have a 4K display, a TV or a monitor that allows 4K, you still have to take into consideration some other factors such as the price. The main feature that the Xbox Series S brings to the table, it's the competitive price that it has. At around £250 or $300, it's the cheapest of the new generation consoles that you can get. After 6 months of owning both of them, I have a clear understanding of the main differences, the main strengths that each of them has. I do have to say that I don't have the PS5 digital version because I wasn't able to get one. The only one I was able to get 6 months ago was the PS5, the disc version, so I did not doubt and I went for that. The main difference between the PS5s, both of them, is just that one doesn't have disc and the other one does. Whereas in the Xbox Series S, there are a few differences that you have to take into account. The biggest one being the graphics downgrade that you get with the Xbox Series S. So you'll hear a lot of people say that the Xbox Series X has 12 teraflops compared to 4 teraflops that the Xbox Series S have. But in real life, the teraflops are not a really good comparison or let's say benchmark to divide both of them, because on its own right the Xbox Series S achieves a 2K and that can be upscaled to 4K, and the PS5 on the other side has 10.3 teraflops, which is not that different from the Xbox Series X, but is a massive upgrade from the 4 teraflops that the Xbox Series S has. So there's a lot of difference between, 12 teraflops, 4 teraflops, 10.3 teraflops, and I'm throwing all these numbers around and you might be a bit confused. But what that means is that basically the graphical performance of the consoles are kind of measured in teraflops. So I'm throwing all these numbers around and you might think, well, what the hell, the Xbox Series X has 12 teraflops, I might just get that. But it's not as simple. Architectures are the same. They're both consoles, the Xbox and the PS5, they're x86 machines, but the software, it's proprietary, and the way the software and the hardware speak to each other, the pipelines, it's all very hard to understand. I struggle myself to understand it. But from what I understand, the Xbox Series S and the PS5, although they have a massive difference in teraflops, 4 against 10.3, the graphical differences, they're not that massive. And what I mean by that, it's you won't be able really to tell that the Xbox Series S, it's upscaling, if you're going to play 4K, that is upscaling from 2K to 4K. If you're looking at them exactly side by side, if you have one screen on the left having the Xbox Series S and one screen on the right having the PS5 or the Xbox Series X, you might be able to draw some differences between the two, but it's not a massive difference. There is that debate about dynamic resolution, and Call of Duty might dip from 1080p below that to achieve a 120 FPS, to achieve a constant FPS count. That also happens with the Xbox Series X and the PS5. It's not like they don't do that, but it's less of a difference because you're going from maybe 1440p or 1800p to maybe 1200p, something like that. It just dips below 2K to achieve the 120 FPS. It's not like the Xbox Series S or the PS5 don't do that. It's just that there's more of a difference if you're going below 1080p, if you're going below full HD, than if you're going below 2K. But like I said, there's not that much of a difference between the 2K 120 FPS and the 1080p 120 FPS. PC gamers know that. PC gamers prefer much more to play at 1080p 120 FPS with shadings, textures, and all that stuff. They prefer that than playing at 2K or even 4K, but all of that turned off. So if you have a 2K monitor that allows 120 FPS, with the PS5 you're going to be stuck at 1080p 120 FPS because the PS5 does not recognize that it can go at 2K 120 FPS with that monitor. The PS5 will revert to 1080p 120 FPS. So I don't think it's as simple as saying the PS5 has native 4K, it runs at 120 FPS too and at 2K or 4K, and you have the ray tracing going on for the Xbox Series S. It's not the ray tracing on the Xbox Series S, to be honest, I don't think it's something that I would rather play at 2K or maybe upscaled to 4K without ray tracing, because the FPS count is going to be way higher than if you turn ray tracing on. So for me, honestly, I would prefer to play it without ray tracing and to get a more stable FPS count than to enable ray tracing. You do get ray tracing with the PS5, digital version and disc version. It's a great console. Do not think that because of the teraflops and this and that, that it's not a good console, because it's a great console. You're not going to be able to find anywhere either a gaming computer or another console that you can play 120 FPS for £250 or $300. That's just impossible. You're not going to be able to find anything out there that you can play 120 FPS with at that price. It's just virtually impossible. It's not a tremendous or a massive downgrade. You are getting 2K and up to 120 FPS, although you won't get 2K at 120 FPS in most games. In most games, if they allow a 120 FPS mode, you are probably going to be stuck around the 1080p mark. PS5 digital version, native 4K, 120 FPS at 4K if the game allows it. There's only a handful of games that allow 120 FPS at 4K. Most of the AAA games that you will want to play, such as Call of Duty, Fortnite, some rally games and stuff like that, they are probably going to be stuck at the 2K 120 FPS mark on the Xbox Series X and on both PS5s, the digital version and the disc version. But not everyone, and I think the majority of the people actually don't have a 4K 120 FPS TV, HDMI 2.1. Most of the people out there either have a monitor that allows 120 FPS at 1080p or 2K. That's where you have to take into account the Xbox Series S, because it's the perfect match. Let's say for a monitor that's 2K 120 FPS, while the PS5, if you have a monitor that's 2K 120 FPS, most of the gaming monitors out there that have a reasonable price are going to be, if you want high FPS, they're going to be probably 2K 140Hz, 160, depending on your budget, but those are at a competitive price. If you want a monitor that supports 4K HDMI 2.1 120 FPS, you are probably going to spend a pretty penny buying that monitor. That's where the Xbox Series S comes in, because that's what you get is 1440p 120 FPS. The games that allow 120 FPS at 2K, I think Ori and the Will of the Wisps is one of them. You will get 2K at 120 FPS, because if you don't have a 4K TV that can go up to 120 FPS, there's really no point. If you're on a tight budget and you're thinking about buying the PS5 digital version, mainly because it's cheaper than the disc version, and you don't have a 4K 120 FPS TV or monitor, let's say in an ideal world, you have both. You have the PS5 digital version and the Xbox Series S. And you have a TV or monitor that only supports 2K 120 FPS. With the Xbox Series S, you're going to be able to utilize the console to its fullest potential, because either way, if you want to play 4K, it's going to be a rescaled 4K. But if you want to play at 2K, which you can toggle the settings to only letting it get up to 2K, if you have a 2K 120 FPS monitor, if you want to play a 2K game such as Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you're going to be able to play it at the native 2K resolution that the Xbox Series S can bring to the table, and you're going to be able to play at 120 FPS in Fortnite, Call of Duty, Destiny, etc, etc, etc. You have to take all of this into consideration. What TV or monitor you're going to use with the consoles, what is your price range. The Xbox Series S is significantly cheaper than the PS5, $100 or £100. You have to make an informed choice about the console that you're going to get. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Bye bye.